It's finally Friday. It's Friday, Friday.
Thank God it's
All right, welcome back to the Friday Show, presented by the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association. I'm Scott Jagow, along with Ray Paulick. We're glad to have you with us. Ray, the slings and arrows keep coming at the horse racing industry. The latest was this week, California Senator Dianne Feinstein calling for a suspension indefinitely of racing at Santa Anita due to the rash of fatalities and asking for an investigation into what's happening here. And then there's the push possibly for federal legislation that has been lying in Congress for a number of years. As we stand right now, where do you think this whole thing is headed?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball. It's kind of hard to tell. But it's interesting to me that the same day that Senator Feinstein wrote to Chuck Winter, the chairman of the California Horse Racing Board, calling for a suspension of racing, California Horse Racing Board announced they're having a meeting next week. It was not on their regular schedule to consider reallocation of dates that have been granted to the Los Angeles Turf Club that runs Santa Anita, the Stronach Group. So the California Horse Racing Board is thinking, what if we have more fatalities at Santa Anita, what are we going to do? You can't. It's an enormous machine, California horse racing, in terms of the number of employees, in terms of the horses. We know that the horses can't just sit around in their stalls and do nothing. So they need a contingency plan, and I think that's probably what they're going to be talking about. Tim Ritfo, the COO for the Stronach Group, said, "We're not going anywhere. We're gonna run our meeting at Santa Anita," and they've taken the corrective measures that they can with the racetrack. And the California Horse Racing Board approved the Stronach Group request for medication reform, which does things like cuts in half the amount of lasix that you can give on race day, and it pushes further out from race day the anti-inflammatories that you can give to horses, the joint injections, and that sort of thing, which actually puts California in line with the International Federation of Horse Racing Authorities guidelines.
But of course, there are many other racing jurisdictions in this country, and this is not a local issue anymore. It certainly has broadened to a national scope, and people inside the industry, even in Kentucky, realize that now, or are starting to see it, because the Kentucky Thoroughbred Farm Managers Club had a meeting the other day, and there was a lot of consternation among the people there. It was a packed house, and a lot of the sentiment was, look, we may not like it, but the public perception of this sport is really bad. Dr. Larry Bramlich, the renowned surgeon, talked about how he used to not support the idea of federal legislation, the Horse Racing Integrity Act, but now he does. He sees what might happen to the game if nothing is done, or if we just rely on the same old language that we need to fix it, but the structure prevents that from happening. So we need federal oversight from the nonprofit group USADA, for example. And Bramlich cited the NFL and concussions, and how the NFL stepped forward finally and was proactive in changing the rules about using the helmet, because kids weren't playing football anymore because their parents wouldn't let them. So the NFL saw the long game there and did something about it, and Bramlich is saying horse racing needs to do the same thing.
Yeah, and what's been going on at Santa Anita really demonstrates how dysfunctional we are as an industry to make change. In the NFL, all it takes is the team owners and the commissioners saying, okay, we're going to change the rules. In horse racing, the Stronach Group wants to change the rules at Santa Anita. Well, they can get that done with the blessing of the California Horse Racing Board. But if they want to change the rules in Maryland or in Florida, they've got to get different regulatory approval. And it's not easy to get 10 states, 20 states, 30 states. We have so many racing commissions in these different states to all get on board at the same time, agree to the same thing. That's why the federal legislation, in my mind, is critical. I think we're not going to get anything done on a broad national basis without this legislation. And we need to change, as the speakers at the Farm Managers Club put it, because the public right now looks at horse racing and does not see a very good, clean sport.
In fact, the president of that group said, and I quote, referring to the public's image of horse racing, they think we beat our horses, we feed them full of drugs, and then we kill them in the end. It's horrible to say that, but that's the perception, end quote. So, the realization is there. One of the issues that they talked about that one person referred to as the dragon in the room, I guess, is lasix. Lasix is still part of this federal legislation, and because it is, the horsemen's groups still aren't on board. My question to you, Ray, is if lasix were taken out of the equation, first of all, do you think that should happen? And second of all, do you think it would make a difference?
Well, I think should it happen, I wish that the United States could join the rest of the world and race without lasix. And I think they can race without lasix. But I don't think they can convince the horsemen that they can do it. I think they, for whatever reason, they think they must have lasix. And if in my mind, if this federal legislation, which currently does include a prohibition on race day medication, which is lasix, if that part of the bill was stricken, that really gives the HBPAs of the world and the THAs no legitimate reason to oppose it, because we all want national rules. We all want to see what's best for the horse. And the argument is that lasix is better for the horse than not giving it lasix. That's what the horsemen say. That's what many veterinarians say. And it's hard to argue that point because it does reduce internal bleeding. But the public looks at that and says, well, if a horse has to have lasix in order to race, maybe it shouldn't be racing. And that's a very legitimate question, too. But back to your question, yes, I think if they were to take that provision out of the bill, it would have a much better chance of passing.
Yeah, and I think that may just be the road we have to go down in order to get something done, because, and people pointed out in this meeting, it's actually not the government oversight. It's not government oversight of the horse racing industry. It's a nonprofit, USADA. The government would have a way to step in if things didn't work or things weren't going well, but if all the proper things were in place and it was working well, then there would be no need for the government to step in. But there comes a point where you just have to say we need some sort of national structure. There is a bill in Congress that provides it. It's right there. And even, we're starting to hear from groups like the Jockey Club who've, always supported this measure, but now they're stepping up, sending out more press releases. They did a white paper about it. The Stronach Group is now pushing harder to get this bill. So maybe what stands in the way is a certain senator in Kentucky named Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, who he's kind of the gatekeeper, right? And Churchill Downs might end up being the key to getting this passed, in my opinion.
Yeah, Mitch McConnell is from Louisville. Churchill Downs has a lot of influence on the senior senator from Kentucky. Nothing is going to get on the floor of the Senate without Mitch McConnell's blessing, and I don't think he's going to give it the blessing without Churchill Downs going to him and saying, we really need this. Churchill Downs has got their own idea that they can self-regulate by creating an internal Office of Racing Integrity. And look, we've tried self-regulation before. We've gone down this path before. It doesn't really work, and I can't see this working either. So, if it's lasix that's the hang-up with Churchill Downs, maybe there's a compromise that can be struck.
Yeah, I think Churchill Downs, as powerful and influential as it is, this is an opportunity for them to step up and lead the industry in the right direction. And I hope that they will do that because it's starting to feel dire, and people are talking about it like it's dire at these meetings across the country where the industry is getting together and going, look, guys, the perception is the reality. Bramlett said dead horses and drugs aren't acceptable. And that's the perception that it is out there. If the measure doesn't pass now, after this scenario, then it's probably never going to pass. All right, but let's ask the question about lasix. If lasix, the prohibition of it, were taken out of the Horse Racing Integrity Act, do you think it would probably pass? Let us know your thoughts with our poll at PaulickReport.com. Ray, give us the latest on the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association.
Well, there's been a lot of state breeding programs put together, and a lot of them since the casinos and slot machines became part of the landscape. The big fear in a lot of states is, gee, if I invest in bloodstock, are the politicians who gave this money to us through slot machines going to take it away? And Pennsylvania has some good news that they're not going to take it away. So this is a really good time. If you're going to invest in bloodstock, Pennsylvania is a good place to do it. The awards program there is very good for breeders of PA breds, and especially breeders of PA breds who are sired by stallions standing in the state. So it's a good program, and it's getting bigger.
And we appreciate their support of the Friday show. That's going to do it for this edition. We'll talk to you soon.